Hi, Prashant. Thank you for making time for today's episode. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Shivani.
All right. So, Prashant, today's episode is all about discussing customer journey. And a brief introduction to the audience. I'm Shivani. I work as a CSM at SmartKarrot. It's been 2 wonderful years here. And now I would like Prashant to introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Shivani. So I'm Prashant. I'm currently a CSM here at HubSpot in Dublin. So I've been with HubSpot for almost 5 years, coming to 5 years. Can't believe it's been 5 years. But yeah, been a CSM for 5 years. I have not always been a CSM in my career. My career trajectory has been very similar to like the flywheel, where I started off as a product marketing manager, then I moved to sales, and right now I'm a CSM. So I've kind of gone around the flywheel. So I'm going to stick to CSM for now, at least. But yeah, I've been having a good time so far.
Like most of us, we were in some different aspects, and then we found CS or CS found us. So, all good things. All right, then let's start today's episode. And we are going to talk about, like I mentioned earlier, customer journey. So, we're going to talk about where Prashant and I connected earlier, and he talked about these 6 different calls that he has with his customer. So I thought it would be a good idea to plan your customer journey roughly around these 6 different kinds of calls. So we start from the introductory call, of course, you first connect with the client, and then when your product activation is happening, which is roughly your adoption, then how do you handle upsell, cross sell, so on and so forth. So I'll start with your thought because it's your idea, Prashant. What is it that you discuss on the introduction and the account planning call?
Yeah, Shivani. So for the introduction account planning call is very crucial because first impression, right? You'll never get another opportunity to make that first impression. So keeping that in mind, uh, depending on how the setup is you have in your company, for HubSpot, how we work is we have a growth plan call, which is essentially the customer onboarding specialist and myself as a CSM will get on a call along with the customer, and then there'll be an official handover. And this is that call. And so essentially, the call is for the onboarding specialist to go through what they've actually done throughout the onboarding, what their priorities are, goals are, where they are at the moment, and then they'll hand over it to me on the call. And what my goal is to introduce myself, identify and reiterate their goals, plans, and challenges and timeline. I always stick to the very basic, the GPCT. A lot of that's from my sales background, where that's goals, plans, challenges, and timeline. As long as I have these four, I'm like I can make sure that the customer actually reaches their desired outcome. So I do that, and then I determine a strategy for how to drive value using HubSpot in the future for them. So it's around 45-minute call,
Mhm.
and is essentially like building that initial rapport and digging further into the next steps. So I'll do an introduction of myself, discover the next step, a
Mhm.
high level overview of what we worked on over the past year,
Mhm.
over the past months from the onboarding specialist.
Mhm.
And then it's a really good time to actually set the stage where you can create and work on a joint success plan. And moving forward, you can always refer to that joint success plan, whether that's come renewal, you want to see how the progress was. So it's really setting up that stage from the get go,
Mhm.
and building that relationship. Some of the best practices I think is to make sure that you review the notes
Mhm.
that the sales rep actually gave you, that the onboarding specialist actually gave you, or even the previous CSMs for certain customers that go and make sure that you're not making the customer repeat themselves, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So having that's one of the best practices for that introduction and account planning call. So yeah, that's how I typically approach that.
All right. So just to be clear that these handovers that you have on the call, they're actually done in the background already. And the success plans are already maybe drafted. And when you're having these conversations with your clients, you are either, referencing your notes that am I right when I was planning this, or do you plan and you're just making notes and then you plan afterwards? How does it work, if you can?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Shivani. So it really depends, but more often than not, you actually come prepared with a joint success plan based on the previous notes
Mm-hmm.
from the sales rep, all the onboarding specialists, all the previous CSMs, and then you come and let them know that, hey, this is what was previously discussed. This was your goal that you mentioned that you want to achieve in the next 3 to 6 months. Is that goal still relevant, or things have changed on your side? Whether
Oh,
that it's been a tough market. So just checking on them like, hey, did you have layoffs, or is something happening on your side that has affected the goals
mm.
or plans for yourself, and just aligning yourself with that.
Okay, that's really good to know. So that's the first call, or one of the many first calls that all CSMs have to have with their clients, and it's good to have this overview and be prepared before you, of course, have that call. Second in sequence is product activation and strategy discussion that you have with your client, hopefully. Of course, not to mention that this is the immediate second call. The next step after, of course, introduction and planning is going to the adoption phase, and therefore product activation and strategy. So, Prashant, if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, so this is actually the most common type of call for a
Mm.
CSM. I would imagine it typically happens again. It depends on your company, but it typically happens every 6 to 8 weeks on what your call cadence is with your customer, depending on your segment. But yeah, this is essentially to check in on how the customer is executing on their high level goals from the initial call that we have,
Yeah.
and we can spend the bulk of the call helping the customer drive adoption of a new tool that
Mm.
solves a business challenge for them, depending on the joint success plan that we discussed.
Right.
And then the outcome, I would imagine, of the call is to reconfirm the business goals, and drive that expanded adoption of the HubSpot tools, in my case, to support my customers' core business operation.
Mm.
So basically, in turn, you're trying to make them stickier in that sense
Mm.
with your tool, but at the same time, of course, your main goal is to help them achieve the desired outcome. If that makes sense.
All right. So I'm guessing this is the call that you have either bi-weekly or every week, depending on the ARR or the MRR that comes. And these are the repeated discussions that you have over time with the customers. Am I right?
Correct. Correct. Yeah. Depending on your segment. So I'm mid market and corp. So I have around 130 customers, Shivani. So I can't really do like weekly or bi-weekly. So our cadence is more monthly, and having that call. So another best practices that I can think of for this call
Mhm.
actually would be uh, on on just having whatever tool you're using for to keep track of whether that's HubSpot. Hopefully, you're using HubSpot as a CRM.
Or SmartKarrot.
Yeah, shameless plug. But then, just having a your notes pinned in your CRM, so you can immediately like pinpoint customer pain points and come prepared with the solution. You don't have to go search for those,
Okay.
and just practice. I mean, practicing active listening, and just shifting your agenda based on the customer responses during the call, and
Yes.
looking for those growth opportunities.
It's very, I would say, not interesting is not the word, but I was having a discussion, I would say, day before yesterday with a senior professional from CS industry. And one of the key skills he highlighted that a CSM should have is active listening. And the fact that you mentioned again on the call today, it highlights, just reiterates the importance of that, the fact that these are calls. So one of the most important skill that CSMs should carry through all of this is actively listening and just not pushing your agenda on the clients, and making sure the customers remain the priority during the calls. It's a
Yeah,
good.
totally. I've been using Gong here internally. We use Gong, and it actually shows you the talk ratio. They call it the talk ratio on
Okay.
how much you spoke and how much the customer spoke, and they'll give you the
Yeah.
best practice rating. So it's a good way to kind of know
Yeah.
where you're at. how much you are talking and how much you're letting the customer actually talk. So a lot
Yes.
of question asking skill also comes into play, like what kind of questions you're asking to the customer, and it's not a binary questions, hopefully it's an open-ended question, so where you can discover more.
Yes, asking the right questions. Yeah. And because you stated that example, I think CS in industry should be working more hand in hand with AI and ML because it gives us tools and
Totally
keys to just make you better at what you're already doing. So, yeah.
agreed.
And the next in sequence, of course, while the adoption is going on at some or the other stage, definitely an upsell or cross-sell is going to be discussed. So when these calls are happening, or hopefully one call where you're going to pitch your upsell or cross-sell, what is it that should be discussed, or what are the right set of questions to ask?
I think before even coming to this call, Shivani, I think I need to make sure that the customer is actually seeing value from the current subscription. If they're not even still seeing value from the current subscription, if I go in and pitch to them an upsell or cross sell, they're gonna get pissed off. You know what I mean? So
Okay.
so
Okay.
having that to even like begin to even like think of initiating this call is pretty crucial. But I think it's important to, again, like this is one of the skills that you can glean from the sales folk, is that you must be ready to position and pitch
Mm.
the best solution to the customer's pain point. Always maybe improve your skills of doing a demo, for example, a quick
Mhm.
demo, or so on and so forth. So the idea is to always dive into the larger business context that led to this opportunity,
Mhm.
and confidently position on how your product can solve that problem for that customer. So, uh, you know, uh, the potential solution could be a product or a professional service, integration partner, whatever that might be.
Mhm.
Having that, again, going back to the joint success plan, you know what their goal is.
Mhm.
You know what their plans, challenges, timeline is. Based on that, what product or service or integration is gonna benefit them. So the outcome here in HubSpot, the outcome of the call is really to identify what the customer pain point is, identify and qualify, and then pass it on to the sales rep who's going to close the deal. So who's going to go on a call, on a separate call, do a proper demo, go into all those details and queries, and then like then see if the deal can be closed or not. So that's the typical process here. But then, yeah, that would be my advice. That's how I approach it.
All right. So, not to be lost in day-to-day operations and always have a bigger goal in mind. While you're trying to adhere to your success plan, also have the larger customer goals in mind that by the end of this year, not just this quarter, not just this month, what are they trying to achieve and what are their KPIs that they're going to work on? So, that's something that I think I, as a CSM, and so many others that I talk to, we kind of lose focus on because in day-to-day operations you're dealing with some issues or bugs or you're working on a dashboard or a report, and then you lose sight. Oh, okay, you know that's the bigger aim. So maybe this, I need to spend a little more time of my everyday schedule to make sure that in the end when I am talking during my upsell or my renewal, the bigger goal that my customer is trying to achieve is not lost in day-to-day operations. So that's.
Exactly. Yeah.
And while you were beginning to answer the upsell or cross-sell, you mentioned that do not forget value demonstration. So the calls that we have when we are in the adoption phase, or let's say we plan our renewal 90 days ahead or an upsell 2 months ago, we transition from a day-to-day call to a value demonstration call. So what should be the aim when we are having these calls?
So this typically happens for, it can happen for larger accounts, smaller accounts, depending, but it's more where when a stakeholder above your main POC
Mhm.
or super user wants a report to show what HubSpot, for example, in my case, has done for their company, what the ROI has been.
Mhm.
Uh, it For smaller accounts, I've noticed is often when the main POC is also the decision maker and wants to assess the value of the product to their business. So the outcome, again, realizing what the outcome of this call is essentially to position the value of your product to the key stakeholders at a customer's business, right? So it also serves an opportunity to revisit customer goals, expand influence within the account by making those strong connections with your new stakeholders. So again, aligning your value conversation to their going back to the established goal.
Mhm.
I always see this customer success. I think Lincoln Murphy has this perfect equation of what customer success is basically desired outcome plus appropriate experience. So we need to make sure, okay, what is that desired outcome? And they always, he also has a really good quote where he says, you can, I might be butchering this, but then he says that you can focus on expansion, renewal, and all that stuff. But instead of doing that, you focus on helping the customer achieve desired outcome instead of focusing in all that those variables, which will help in turn address those variables. So that makes sense. So coming from that perspective, Shivani, referring back to the big wins, demonstrating the progress you made, going back to the joint success plan, like, hey, this is what you actually mentioned your goal was for
Mhm.
this quarter, and we managed to achieve this. So it's very important to have that you know progress report using
Mhm.
your joint success plan, because if you don't have that, then you're just shooting in the dark, like, hey, because you don't know what they achieved, the customer is not sure, unsure, so there's no structure per
I
se to
agree.
show that value. So I think that joint success plan is pretty key to make sure this value demonstration call actually is productive
It
and
does.
goes your way.
I realize, especially when I'm having my MBR or my QBR with my clients, that they play a very crucial role when your upsell or your renewal is coming up. What you've demonstrated,
Exactly.
a good time to let your customer know.
Yeah.
Coming to the renewal, every CSM, or if it's part of your policy, you are going to deal with, hopefully, yes, hopefully,
Oh, yes.
renewal call. So while we are dealing with a successful or in not so great of a renewal situation, how do we position ourselves in these calls?
I think again, like you should go back to reviewing the progress. It's renewal should be the goal of renewal should definitely be uh so that it's a non-event. It just you should come to a place where it's just a natural progression that the customer actually, okay, renewing. You
Yeah.
know, it shouldn't come to a point where you're like negotiating big time, like, oh, where's the ROI? Like, I didn't use this product. You don't wanna be come to that place. You want to make sure that you want to avoid that place. So again, like reviewing the progress of a customer that has made in the last year towards their stated goal, and you should start this conversation way ahead. Now is like since the pandemic, people have started like advising like, hey, start your conversation 9 months ahead. Like I typically start 6 months. I think I would say six
Mhm.
months ahead. Just bringing that up, and recently I actually saw one of my colleague who in the meeting link she has one form field where it says how comfortable are you with the renewal rating from 1 to 10 in her meeting link, which is interesting. I would be interested to see how that works.
Yeah.
So things like that, just getting a sense way ahead, not waiting for
Mm,
that renewal positioning call. Renewal actually starts way ahead
yes.
in time. So having that perspective and coming prepared. So how internally we work, Shivani, here is I have a contract manager who I work closely with, who manages all things contract on the admin side, on the contractual legal side of things. So I don't dwell into that piece, which is great for me
Mm,
because I can focus on the value that was derived by using our product. And one thing I would like to call out is just being bold and direct in asking about customers' confidence in their renewal.
mm,
Don't go around beating the bush like, hey, customer, like, are you going to renew? What are your feelings about renewing right now? Just get a clear answer, and then approach it on how do you navigate that conversation.
I like how you said that renewal should be non-eventful, because I think we all dread the days when renewals are around. It's only 30 days, only 15 days. So the more uneventful you make it, the more easier you make it for the customer, because nobody likes having a lot of to and fro around if this should happen, that should happen. If you're delivering the value during the adoption phase or during the value demonstration calls, like you mentioned, your renewal call is going to be non-eventful. It will just be a mention. Hopefully, like your colleague mentions the link, and that's a good strategy to adopt. I think a lot of our listeners,
Yeah.
they can feel inspired and hopefully try that out.
Yeah.
And the last of the calls, but uncomfortable ones, where the customer is not that happy, and or maybe there's an escalation. So these are all difficult conversations. May happen not that frequently, maybe just once a year, but these are going to happen, and with not hopefully not with every customer, but whenever we are having these conversations where customer is frustrated on value delivery, on the implementation cycle, or just on the outcome, how do we deal with it, and how do we navigate these calls?
Recently, Shivani, interestingly, I kind of changed my perspective in at looking at these difficult conversation instead of, because when you say difficult conversation, it just like gives you like, okay, it is actually going to be a difficult conversation. Let's approach it. It's if rather than defining it as difficult, like if you just approach it as a conversation, it's a mere conversation. You just have to approach it with being empathetic to the customer's frustration and allow them the space to express how they feel. And then you can accurately diagnose the problem before even jumping into this solution. So it can actually result from a variety of issues: product frustration, billing confusion, poor support, or renewal experience. It can be anything. And one thing to remember, I always remind myself as a CSM, is not my job to have all the answers, but it is my job to identify what can and can't be resolved using my product and service,
Mhm.
and help remove those roadblocks by connecting my customers to the right resource. So the outcome, I would say, of this call is to de-escalate the
Mhm.
situation, and then either solve the customer's problem, or connect them with someone else who can.
Yeah.
So we want to reduce the friction and any major impact on the customer's experience as a whole.
Yeah.
And I need to make sure that I actually navigate through internally to make sure that these are addressed in time.
All right. Be empathetic during the calls. Well, again, one of the core CSM skills. And customers already agitated, and any mishap at this point can lead to not a very good NPS or a CSAT score, and you don't want that. Prashant, this has been a very lovely conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed having this chat with you. And once again, thank you so much for your time for this.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Shivani. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, then we'll catch up later. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, bye.